Onto politics now, and Lindiwe Sisulu is looking to knock Cyril Ramaphosa off his perch. And is she going to replace him, or at least try to replace him as president of the ANC? Well, many analysts say that with her opinion piece gunning for the judiciary and constitution this week, Sisulu is kick-starting her campaign. In that piece, Sisulu accused judges of being, inverted commas, mentally colonized, close quotes. So how does this all play into the ANC's political battle ahead of the party's elective conference? We chat to political analyst Sanusha Naidu now for some insights. Sanusha, welcome back. I hope you had a good break, because this year is going to be a roller coaster, I suspect. And it started off in quite a dramatic fashion. Sisulu, a blue blood of the ANC, struggle stalwart, joining the RET faction. What's going on?
Good morning, Anika, and I trust you did the same, had a good break, because, yeah, you're right. We're in for a very, very bumpy year, if not the year for living dangerously in South Africa. I think at the end of the day, when you look at the piece, you look at the responses, and then, of course, she's issued a new piece where you kind of get the sense that Ms. Sisulu has always been in that context of where does she go with her political career, and whether or not this is the right trajectory around approaching that career path in terms of what's the ultimate prize that you want. And we've seen in the media speculation about this is now setting to motion her campaign, so to speak, for the elective conference to be held later this year by the ANC. I think it does make very interesting in terms of the dynamics that are unfolding. We can't emphasize how much more the ANC has fragmented. We can't emphasize that these factional battle lines have become not just cleavages, they've become gaping holes in the ANC. And this latest saga that we see, as bizarre as it may seem in terms of what the dynamic is in terms of the narrative around the attack on the judiciary, questioning the judiciary's ability to address issues of inequality, the question of discrimination. It's also a question of raising it back to Ms. Sisulu and asking, well, being the blue blood of the ANC, given the fact that your dad and your mum were quite critical ANC stalwarts, at the same time, you were part of this whole process from '94. You also raised questions about other ANC members and what their role has been in the liberation struggle. I think it raises a dynamic for me in terms of get away from, debating the questions that she raises in terms of that, but just in terms of how does then she really feel about this transition, this question of our political dispensation, and where was that voice previously?
I mean, for me, the article is a really good clanger, criticize the judiciary. Lots of civil society is going to make a big fuss. For me, it was a litmus test to see what kind of reaction she was going to get. In 2017, she put her hat in the ring for president of the ANC. She didn't get enough support. Did she feel snubbed at a later stage by Ramaphosa because she was regarded as being part of his camp a couple of years ago?
Well, we know that 2017 elective conference at Nasrec, I mean, that was all kinds of interesting trajectories and complexities of deal making and what kind of negotiations took place behind the scenes. And obviously for Ms. Sisulu, it didn't come out in the way, or it didn't pan out in the way that she wanted it. And I think you kind of put it out there in a way to say that she's testing the ground, she's testing the waters, she's testing to see where these factional battle lines she'll align with. And of course, taking this kind of approach, this narrative, which is a very sensitive narrative. It's a politically sensitive narrative because it's talking to the Constitution. It's talking to the separation of powers between the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. It's challenging the judiciary to say that you're not doing your job. I think throws the whole thing into an incomplete disarray, and it opens up that debate has been the question about, as we go into what kind of judiciary is taken forward in terms of the fact that this judiciary has always been, in the last several years, the arbitrator of our democracy. It's been the go-to or default strategy of litigation by democracy. Throwing that into the ring and saying, how much have you done? Are we not talking about transformation in the way that you look at, in terms of not just about some of the language she used, and which is very politically sensitive in other parts of the world, but I think at the same time, it's putting it out there in a manner that is taking the debate on discrimination, race, etc., into an interesting dynamic around what we've never been able to resolve for ourselves in our transformation in South Africa.
Sanusha, it certainly seemed from Zondo's response that it was very insulting to black judges. It sort of accused them of being patsies, if you like, and being good, inverted commas, good blacks. So not a good response there from, not welcomed by the judiciary, even if it's a debate that needs to be had. But, I mean, should she be disciplined now by Ramaphosa?
Well, I do think there needs to be a response from the president, particularly in terms of, this is a senior member in his cabinet. This is a senior member of his party, a senior individual on the NEC. And, it fuels these dynamics that you say, in terms of a litmus test. It throws into the space how people will then perceive and the perceptions that it has. And he has to now come back and say, am I in a cabinet that basically is cohesive? And clearly he's not. He doesn't have a cohesive cabinet. There's not a cohesive party. And all of these things are basically challenging him in his presidency. So what does this mean for the president going forward is, we come back to the issues that we were speaking about at the end of last year, speaking about throughout, I think, for 2 or 3 years in South Africa, about levels of trust. In his own party, I think his questions of trust and levels of trust and mistrust and all of that, he finds himself having to firefight in his own parties, and excuse the pun, because we started this year firefighting in Parliament. Sure. So I think at the end of the day, he has to find a way to say, do I discipline her? Or do I then take a more middle of the road approach, because I'm worried about my own second term for the party?
That's right, Sanusha, and as we wrap up, in the January the 8th statement, Ramaphosa kept on using the word discipline, 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 and that ill discipline will not be tolerated. Let's see what happens. Thank you so much to political analyst there, Sanusha Naidu.